Hi everyone, I'm recording a video lecture for Module 5. The first thing I'm going to show you is some things I've uploaded to the handouts and resources part of modules. So I uploaded these 4 documents here. One's called the Rhetorical Précis. I have information on the annotated bibliography, and then I have 2 student samples for you of the annotated bibliography assignment. One is a high passing grade, and the other is an example of a failing grade. And I'm going to show all of these to you. So the first thing I want to do is just look at what you've got for Module 5. Looks like a lot of stuff, but 3 of those are quizzes, and these are all related to, the textbook readings that you have for this week, which is they're on the annotated bibliography and also on APA, because you will be doing APA officially for the first time with this annotated bibliography assignment. So that's why the readings are like that, and that's why you've got these 3 quizzes, because one's on references, one's on, in-text citations or how to integrate a source using APA, and then the other is avoiding plagiarism, which is integrating sources so that you are not unintentionally plagiarizing. There's intentional plagiarism, and then there's unintentional plagiarism. And unintentional plagiarism is where you integrate a source but maybe forget to cite it, or if it's a quotation, you forget to put quotation marks around it. So I've already, in my announcement, I've gone through everybody's summary and strong response assignments and have provided feedback on those, and all peer review feedback was due yesterday. So everybody should be in the process of not only, and this is just a reminder up here, of the peer review, should be focusing on completing these quizzes, revising the summary and strong response, looking at those 2 chapters from the textbook, and then conducting the annotated bibliography assignment for this week. And the annotated bib, unlike the summary and strong response, does not have a revision, so what you submit is your final submission for the first time. And just like everything we've been doing in this class up to this point, everything is prepping you for this classical argument assignment. So doing the library basic training, the Hunt Library course on evaluating sources, the summary and strong response, those learn and share assignments that ask you to kind of think about asking questions and doing some initial research, and especially the summary and strong response assignment, where it actually asks you to engage with an article where you summarize it and then respond to it through analysis. You're going to be continuing that kind of summary and analysis work with the annotated bibliography, and all of this again is meant to they're all scaffolded to prepare you for the classical argument assignment, because for that, which is a standard research paper, you're going to be using all of these, in theory, using all of these tools you're learning in order to complete that assignment. So to kind of talk about the annotated bib assignment, I do have, if I go back to what I uploaded, it's going to be up here. This document here, the annotated bibliography PDF, is essentially where I've just copied what the actual assignment is, and then I've added a little bit of information to it. So if I go into the annotated bib assignment, right, I really just kind of copied this and put it in there, but I'm going to go through it, and then I'll show you what I've added to it. So for this assignment, you are conducting an annotated bibliography. So your first question, if you've never heard this term before, is what on earth is an annotated bibliography? I didn't do one until I was in grad school, but I do think I actually wish I would have done one as an undergraduate, because I love teaching the annotated bibliography assignment. I think it's a really valuable assignment that has a lot of important learning outcomes. attached to it, and that's something that I include in this document. So an annotated bibliography, a bibliography is what we call a references page in APA. So when you have a document where you're integrating sources at the end of that document, right, and some of you may be familiar with this because it's quite normal, is at the end of that document you'll have, if you're working in APA, it's called a references page. If you're working in MLA, it's called a works cited page. But those are both just bibliographies. They're just listing, here are the sources that I used in my paper, and it's meant for the reader. So, well, it's meant, to document that, here are the sources that I actually use, but it's also meant for the reader, so the reader can locate any sources that you used if the reader wants to look more specifically at a particular source. Bibliographies are also great. They're a great way to find sources. So if you find a source that has a really good bibliography on a topic that you're interested in, the chances are you can go to that source's bibliography and just look at sources they use, because chances are they're going to be helpful for you. So bibliographies are also a really good way to find sources. I do that all the time in my writing. So that's the bibliography, right? That's where you list your citations and you format them in APA, since in this course we're doing APA. So an annotated bibliography is where you have that references page, but now every source has an annotation. And an annotation is where you basically summarize and analyze the source. So you provide information on that source. It's a good practice, the annotated bib is good practice to further emphasize research as a pre-writing practice, because it forces you to not just do research and find sources, but it forces you to find research, and by looking for the source's thesis and its argument, by looking through what the authors are doing, it really forces you to consider, is this a good source and a credible source for what I'm writing? So it kind of forces you to go beyond just doing research and kind of finding sources that you would first come across, which is a standard practice. I'm guilty of that as well. Kind of the first one that pops up, I'll say, okay, I'll use it. But then when I go to use it, it might not be appropriate or helpful for whatever it is I'm trying to do. So, okay, so that's what an annotated bibliography is on its own. In terms of what sources you should be using, you're going to be annotating 7 sources, and you need to pick a topic. So you want to identify the topic at the top of the annotated bib, and there's an example in the criteria in Canvas, and then you can also look at the student samples. Particularly, look at the one student sample that got the A grade, to look at how that student formatted their annotated bib, because that will demonstrate how to do it well, how to do it effectively. And you need to find at least 2 articles from, it's a PDF, so I don't know if I can, at least 2 articles from 1 or more databases in the Hunt Library, and at least 1 has to be a scholarly article. So you're being asked to, of those 7 sources, so this is talking about 3 of those. So of those 7 sources, 2 of them you have to find via the Hunt Library, and at least 1 of your 7 sources has to be scholarly. And then you have to cite all of the sources correctly in APA style, and making sure, and this is the entire references list is correctly formatted in APA style, because that really focuses on the alphabetizing of the sources to make sure that your list of sources are actually alphabetized by either the last name if there's an author, and if there's no author, it's the first word of the title minus any articles that would come before it. So if your title is like the something or a something or n something, any of those 3 words you just ignore excuse me, and you go to the word that comes after the definite or indefinite article. A note on some sources not to use, right? You don't want to use Wikipedia. Wikipedia is good for informal research, but you don't want to use Wikipedia as an actual source for your annotated bib or for like your classical argument paper or anything like that. Other sources you want to focus on not using include reference sources. So you don't want to use dictionaries, you don't want to use encyclopedias, and you also don't want to use which aren't reference sources. Things like dissertations and theses. Theses is the plural for thesis. So you don't want to use those long documents that graduate students are writing because those are published, and sometimes they'll come up as scholarly because they are written for a scholarly reason, but we don't use them as sources because they're technically not published, at least not yet. What people usually do with dissertations is that they will then go on to either turn it into a book or turn it into scholarly articles. So, and the other thing you don't want to use, and I'll list these in the in the announcement in which I post this video, you also don't want to use book reviews, which will sometimes also come up as scholarly sources, and that's because book reviews are published in scholarly journals, and so that's why they'll be flagged as scholarly. So you want to steer away from that. So to kind of talk about what each annotation looks like, and you're going to see some similarities between what's being asked for the annotations and what you had to do for the summary and strong response assignment. Is here they're calling it evaluation. So we have the words strong response, we have the word analysis, and we have the word evaluation. So those all mean the same thing, which is analysis. So again, I'm just going to be using the term analysis similar to how I was talking about the summary and strong response assignment. So, and you can see here that just like the summary and strong response assignment, you're starting with the summary and you're then following that with an analysis. And you can hopefully see right away that the analysis, the part 2, is longer than the summary. So just like in the summary and strong response assignment, your analysis is longer than the summary. So you'll be doing a short summary of the information found in the source and then follow that with an evaluation of the source's credibility, reliability, currency, I'll talk about that in a second, possible bias, and usefulness with respect to your topic. So the currency is how valuable something is. So is the research and argument that are being presented in that particular source, is it highly valuable, or is it maybe not so much valuable? So is it just kind of like adding a little bit of information to a topic, or is it really adding a lot of new ideas or challenging ideas? And how we analyze currency, of course, is interpretation. But it's up to you to decide, this is a valuable source for this topic because, and then kind of explain why. So just like I said, this assignment can be revised, and you want to be using the APA manual or a really credible online source about APA, particularly the OWL at Purdue, and I'll put a link to that as well in the announcement where I post this video lecture. And here's the example that's on Canvas under the assignment. So you can see that there's a citation, and then here is the summary. This is the annotation. So we have citation, annotation, and I can't speak today, I'm sorry. The citation, right, and explains here's summary and here's evaluation. Their evaluation looks shorter, so I'm not sure it's the best example of summary evaluation, but it's there. So definitely read through that. But they do explain up here, right, that you don't need to tell me where summary and evaluation is. I'll be able to tell. So you don't have to actually put those words in your annotations. They're just for the sake of the example. And that talks about your submission If I exit out of here, I'm going to go to the second page. So this is where I add a little bit of information. I'm pressing the wrong button. I apologize. So what I did was I have attached some learning outcomes. These are what we call SLOs, student learning outcomes, and these are really important for when you're designing courses because you have to identify this assignment is valuable because the student in theory should be learning these things. So you have to, when you're getting a course accredited, you have to have learning outcomes attached to them. So these are learning outcomes that I attach to the annotated bibliography, and those are things like identifying APA conventions. So obviously being able to execute what's being asked from you in terms of I can look at the APA manual or look at what's expected of me in terms of APA and then execute that in my assignment. Being able to successfully find sources through the Hunt library. Demonstrating audience awareness. So this has to do with like what sources would be good for whatever topic you're writing about. And then these two here are, you can execute an annotation. So you can concisely summarize, and concisely is a key word, but you can do summary, and then you can, the second one, right, you can evaluate or do analysis on the credibility and the reliability of the source. Illustrating the parts and purpose of a paragraph. So this has to do with actually being able to do that summary and do that analysis, but then also craft it in a way that creates a cohesive paragraph that makes sense. So whereas in the summary and strong response you had one paragraph for summary and one or two paragraphs or more for your analysis, here you're just going to have one paragraph, and within that has both summary, which is then followed by the analysis. But again, you don't want to mix the two together. So you always want to keep the summary to summary and the analysis to analysis. Writing appropriate transitional sentences. So again, that has to do with your ability to craft a cohesive paragraph while doing things that have different rhetorical intentions, right? So a summary has its own rhetorical intentions, which are to summarize, and analysis has its rhetorical intention of analyzing credibility and reliability, etc. And then, as always, we're always doing this, so developing skills for writing engaging openings and closings. Why an annotated bibliography? So this is a question I try to presume questions, that's right, that students would have, and one of those might be, why are we doing an annotated bibliography? But so here I try to answer that question by saying that the annotated bib documents the research that you've done, and it can be a great way to evaluate the depth and breadth of your prep for writing a research paper. And doing an annotated bib is also useful because that documentation of research is helpful, because I've been in the position a lot, and maybe some of you have been in the position where I'll have done a lot of research, and maybe I was looking at like one or two sources and I was like, okay, those aren't going to be helpful for my paper, and then I don't document them, and then when I'm writing I'm like, oh geez, that one source had this information in it, now I realize that it's helpful. But because I didn't document that I actually, or took notes anywhere, that I actually was looking at that source, I have to try to re-find it, and that process could either come up with nothing, like maybe I can't re-find it, or you're then spending a lot of time doing work that you already did. So locating resources, so you're going to look for these sources via the Hunt's library databases, right? So you need those two from the Hunt library databases, and at least one of them needs to be scholarly, and then the other sources need to be substantive, right? So they have to be they have to have substance, they have to be substantial, right? So meaning they can't be surface level or superficial in what they're talking about. And I've given just 4 examples of databases from the Hunt library that are useful that I think are some of the more useful, but of course you can look through a variety. I'll open up the Hunt Library's website briefly to kind of show you. So I'm not going to read through the so I have information on actually crafting the citations for each source using APA style. I always recommend not using citation engines ever. And that's because, like I say, if you use a citation engine, they don't teach you anything, so you're not learning anything. And oftentimes they'll produce citations that are incorrect, and it's true. I've seen, and it's oftentimes easy to identify when a citation engine is not or has been used, because I've seen how they've been used for years. So, and the learning process, it does involve learning why the bibliographic information is necessary. So in the process of learning how to craft a citation and how to make a citation manually is a really important process to do, because you're learning how, where do you look in the source to get the bibliographic information you need to make a source. That's an important part of learning to do research. And once you learn it, it's really easy. So I can do it really quick now, but I don't ever fully remember what a citation looks like, especially since there are different citations for different media. So if you're citing a journal article versus a website versus a newspaper article versus a magazine versus a YouTube video versus a tweet, those all, they all generally have a similar format to them, like an equation, but I don't always remember, and you're not expected to ever remember, this goes here, this goes here. I'll do it if I'm working on it regularly. If I'm, when I'm writing and I'm adding citations, I'll get the gist and I'll be able to do it. But when I take maybe weeks and weeks, I don't write a citation, and then I'm like, okay, back to the manual or back to the Owl at Purdue to remember how to do this citation. And then I give some what are hopefully helpful prompts, and I have another handout, the rhetorical précis, on doing summary, but I have some what are hopefully helpful prompts about how you can approach the summary versus the evaluative paragraph. And I highlighted the what is the author's thesis argument, because that is the most important thing. It should go in the first sentence. You don't want to waste time. You just want to get it out right away. And I made this note a lot in the summary and strong response assignment early drafts. It was clear that people were struggling with, how do I start the summary paragraph? I'm not sure what order of information I should give, right? Because I have to give the title and the author and where it's from. And I have a template that I gave to quite a few people, and I'll also give that in the announcement. And I would just recommend following that template. And that template is also in the rhetorical précis document. So the summary, right, should be similar, but just much, much more condensed than the summary from the summary and strong response. So it's, what are they arguing? And then what are the main points that they're using to support that argument, right? That's really what you want to address. And then you want to spend a little bit more time doing the analysis or the evaluative paragraph. And here I'm just giving you a bunch of questions that you could potentially answer. You don't have to answer all of them. And I posit them within ethos logos. It doesn't end here. There's a third page. But, does the author seem credible and fair? Why or why not? Does the author refer to any other outside sources, right? So these are just questions to get you thinking about how to evaluate a source. So I have the ethos, logos, and then pathos, and then overall. Does the author seem to have accomplished their purpose for the audience they seem to be addressing? What was its effect on you? So you can look through those different prompts, and like I said, don't answer all of them. You don't have the space to answer all of them, but maybe some of them will pop out after you choose your sources, and then focus on using those for your evaluative paragraph. So when you do before I go on to what it actually looks like, I'm going to open up the rhetorical précis, which I already have open. And I actually wish I would have given you this before you did your summary and strong response. But this talks about how to do summary. It doesn't talk about analysis, it doesn't talk about evaluation or strong response. It just talks about how to do summary. And this is a much longer example of what summary should look like. But it talks about, and précis is just a fancy word for summary. So that's all précis means. But what it is it's got 4 tasks, and then there are 2 examples after these are what the 4 tasks are, that match the colors of what each task looks like. And I have a basic précis example, which is more what you're doing for the annotated bib assignment, and then I have an example of a more developed and specific précis. So the 4 tasks are, this is where you provide the contextual information, as well as what the argument is. So this is really what you want to do in the first sentence, and this gives you kind of a template to follow. So task 1 provides the name or names of the author. If there's no author, you just go with the title. The genre, what is it? Is it a newspaper article, magazine article, scholarly article, video? You probably won't be using videos, but what's the title of the work with the date? You can put the date in parentheses. And then a concise, appropriate verb, followed by that phrase in which the thesis or argument of the work is quoted. It doesn't have to be quoted. It's really better if it's quoted, but you can paraphrase it. And so you can see down here in the yellow is that first contextual sentence that offers what the argument is, right? So in the introduction to his book, here's the name of the book, the year is in parentheses, the author, he's a Harvard psychologist, there's the concise appropriate verb, suggests is followed by a that, suggests that we need a blah blah blah, a better, more comprehensive working definition of the word prejudice. That's all that first sentence is, that first, and that's a task 1, right? It's a rhetorical task. The second is the methodology. So this is the what points, or not points, excuse me, but like what, well, yeah, points, but what does the author then do to support that thesis / argument? And this is also what you did in the summary and strong response assignment, right? Here's what they argued, here's how they argued for it. Are they bringing in statistics? What are they focusing on? Do they focus on a particular source? Are they using polls, surveys? Are they bringing in charts, tables, whatever they're doing? And right, for this particular one, he gives readers a list of apparent instances of prejudices in the opening passage, and in the second half of the piece, he discusses various existing definitions of prejudice, each one a little more complex than the one before. So a very basic précis, but this is when we have a short space to do a summary. That's task 2. Task 3 is the purpose of the piece. So why did the person write the thing that they're writing? And it suggests using an in order to or an order for phrase. So here you can say, Allport wrote this piece in order for readers to have a definitive definition of the word prejudice. And task 4 is identifying who the audience, who you think the audience is that the writer was writing for. All right, his audience appears to be anyone who would be concerned about prejudice in society and themselves. So that's what a rhetorical précis is. It's just to give you a further breakdown of this is what a summary should be comprised of, and you can see there's no opinion in there, there's no bias, it's just this is just what the writer does, or writers, it's what they do, that's it. I do mention MLA in here, but you can ignore that, and because we are doing APA. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what the annotated bib looks like. And that is in, if you go to modules, I already have them open, but this is where everything is, right? Rhetorical précis, that annotated bib document that I talked about first, and here are the 2 student samples. So I'm going to show you the passing grade example. So this is the cover page here, and I've given you a video on setting up your paper in APA. One thing I recommend doing that I don't know if a lot of students do is you can just, I uploaded it in a Word doc format. You can just download this and insert your own information. So you can just, go in here, modify the title, put your name there, change the title. You can use it. It's already set up. Again, that contradicts with what I said earlier about not using citation machines because you're not learning anything. I do encourage you to learn how to set up a paper in APA, because at Embry-Riddle, APA is going to be a pervasive writing style throughout your classes, so it's definitely something you want to get in the habit of doing. One thing that is driving me crazy about this is not centered. So the only thing this student forgot in terms of APA, I think, is making sure that everything is fully centered. So that looks better. It won't look like that on yours because I uploaded the one where I didn't, or that person didn't center it. This student just chose to practice with where an abstract would go. You're welcome to do that. You don't have to. It was just what they were doing. So they just wanted to practice putting an abstract in where it would go. And then you can see the annotated bibliography starts here, and this is what you want. You want a title, because that's how APA works. You always restate. That's the word I'm looking for. Restate your title on the actual first page of the document. Here's where they listed their topic. It's resurgence of U.S. supersonic air travel. There's a citation, followed by an annotation, and that's how you're going to do it, the whole thing. Everything's just stacked. So it's citation, annotation, citation, annotation, citation, annotation, citation, annotation, etc., for all your 7 sources. And you can see that everything is alphabetized. That is one thing I look for. So we go, there's S, there's R, there's P, there's N, M, L, and D. So it's alphabetized. So I definitely encourage you to look at this for formatting purposes, but also for looking at, so not just looking at it for AP, but also looking at it for how the student wrote the actual annotations themselves. So actually looking at, okay, how did this person do this one annotation that includes the rhetorical intentions of both summary and analysis. The failing sample is for a few reasons in terms of why it failed. So hopefully the first thing you could notice is that it's not an APA. So the font right away isn't right. There's no cover page. There's no headers. There's no page numbers, so right away there's a lack of APA. And one of the major things about the annotated bib assignment is executing APA. So that's something you definitely want to make sure you are doing correctly. The second thing I noticed right away is their citations are numbered, which you don't do. So you don't want any numbers or bullet points or anything like that. The citations are set up so that they don't need additional identifications or particular what we would call signifiers or markers that there is something here. So the hanging indentation is what does that. And that's what separates, if we were to take out these annotations, the hanging indentations allow for readers to quickly gloss through a bibliography, especially a particularly long one. But so then there's the numbers. The citations are not bad. They're not perfect, but they're not bad. So some of them are correct, some of them are not correct. But The citation, or excuse me, the annotations, so APA, which is a major, there's like 3 major aspects to this assignment. APA, which includes the overall document formatting, the citations, right? So that's the first one, APA. The second one is summary, and the third one is analysis, right? So which constitute the annotations. So right away I'm noticing that the citations are quite short. So even though these are shorter annotations, did I say the citation? I'm going to get those confused, citation, annotation. Even though the annotations for this annotated bib are on the shorter side, I notice right away that these are really short. Like this one is 2 sentences. And this one, right, so I'm just going to read through it. These people explain in their article how trying to fix the issue of fixing the wildlife damages may result in bad conversation. It's not an identification of the argument. So even though I haven't read the sources, or I'm very likely not to have read the sources that you are annotating, based on the titles of the sources themselves, I'll be able to presume what an argument for that article might look like. So the title for this, which is a scholarly journal, Journal of Wildlife Management, why compensating wildlife damages may be bad for conservation. So here they put conversation, so different things, right? Conservation and conversation. So the argument for this article should answer that question. So I would anticipate, or I would expect, that in this first sentence there is a bolt and rondeau, right? Well, giving all that contextual information that I showed you in the rhetorical précis. But these writers, argue that, and here's the reason why wildlife damages is bad for conservation. Why is it bad for conservation? That's the ultimate question for this article. They have to have an answer. That one sentence is their summary, so it's not good, that one sentence. And then these other 2 sentences are the evaluation. This will be beneficial to me when I'm agreeing when they explain how trying to fix something that should be fixed could mess this thing up even more. It's informal writing. It's not evaluation, but then this will help me argue the fact that hunting is good. So if we go back to the assignment criteria, they're focusing on usefulness with respect to the topic, but it can't just include that information. The usefulness with respect to your topic is really a justification as to why that source is going to be helpful for your research paper. It's really more of a justification to me. I'm going to include this source because this is what it will allow me to do, or it will help support my argument that blank. Because ultimately what you don't want me doing is when we get to like your classical argument paper is me saying, I don't understand why you have this source in your paper. So really the usefulness with respect to your topic, again, is about justification, but you also need to be focusing on credibility and reliability, which are kind of go hand in hand together. If it's credible, it's probably reliable. If there's any possible bias, right? This may or may not be present in your article. Sorry, I'm disagreeing with myself in my head because I think everybody is biased implicitly, but ignore my statement. You may have obvious bias in your source, but you may also have implicit bias, so you may or may not have that. And then if you want to talk about currency, right, how valuable the contribution, what we would call really the intellectual contribution of the piece. I just didn't want to call it that earlier because that sounds really pretentious, but that's really what the currency is talking about. So you can see that, and I'll just look at one more. Gibbons states that hunting is good for the environment using many examples, not the argument. again, this is a source that starts with a kind of a question. The other one had a question too. Why is hunting good for the environment? Okay, why is it good for the environment? They just say, the student here says, hunting's good for the environment. So they just restate the title and then say they use many examples. So not a summary, not even close. He also believes that hunters are among the greenest people in the nation. No cohesion there. That means the connection between these two sentences is choppy. If you've ever if you've ever been told that your writing is choppy, that's what that means. So those two first sentences, I would say, are an attempt at a summary, but it's not successful. And then this last sentence is, or excuse me, last two sentences are the evaluative or an analytical summary. Or too many writing words I'm dealing with right now. These two sentences are their attempt at an evaluative, or an evaluation of the source. Having this article will help me support my argument in many ways. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything. Gibbons is a pro hunter and has many beliefs as I do. Again, none of this information is helpful. So hopefully you can see, while looking at this failing example, and then looking at the A example, you can see what a successful annotated bib looks like versus an unsuccessful annotated bib. Okay, so that's really what you want to be focusing on for Module 5, is revising that summary and strong response, working to complete those quizzes, looking at those two chapters, and then you hopefully have already started research for the annotated bib. And then completing the annotated bib. The last thing I'll do is I will show the Hunt library. I've got it as a, what is this called, like a quick link or whatever to it, but I'm just going to go to Ernie, and I've got it in my favorites, so I'm going to click on the Hunt library. And I'm going to show you JSTOR. I don't think I've showed you JSTOR before, but I'm going to show it because it's a great database, but you do have to be a little particular about the way you use it. I'm already logged in, I think. So how you do this is, and hopefully this looks familiar because you've done the library basic training, you've done the Hunt library course on evaluating sources. I recommend people go straight to research databases. And then this gives you a list of all of the databases that Embry-Riddle has subscribed to. And all right, here's one of the recommended ones that I gave Academic OneFile. But I'm going to click on J, which will take me to JSTOR. This is short for Journal Storage. And, I'm not logged in, so let me log in really quick. I should already have the Duo authentication completed. Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to show you JSTOR because it's, like I said, a great database, but it does have a specific way you want to go about researching in it. And one of the differences is that it doesn't start with multiple field boxes, and the way to do that is, I always tell people, hit advanced search right away in JSTOR. And that will give you the multiple field boxes, and this page will look similar to what other databases look like. Most databases start with these multiple search boxes. So the thing about JSTOR is that it's one of the largest databases out there, and pretty much everything in it is scholarly. Where you have to be careful is down here where it says item type. So, and that's just to give you an example. Earlier when I said you don't want to use book reviews because book reviews will be flagged as scholarly because they're published in scholarly journals. That's here, right? So reviews are book reviews. So if you're just looking for book reviews, right, you would select that. And that's why I'm giving you that kind of cautionary warning so a scholarly journal is something that's published. I'm starting to see them being published more frequently, but most conventionally they're published sometimes once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, 4 times a year. It's called quarterly. So, and within those there'll be like a few articles, and then there'll be maybe like a lot more book reviews because the book reviews are shorter. They're like 2 or 3 pages. Whereas the articles are going to be between, depending on the journal, between 25 and 50 pages each. So there's a lot more book reviews than there are articles. So if you search through JSTOR, which I recommend because it's a good kind of go-to, has all disciplines in it database, you want to make sure that you click on articles. So the one thing that you don't have to do in JSTOR that you would have to do in other databases is click a box that says scholarly or peer-reviewed. And that's because JSTOR, everything's scholarly. Whereas in other source or databases like Academic OneFile, you would have to say, I only want you to show me scholarly sources, in the instance that you were looking for a scholarly source. So in this one, you don't have to do that, but you do have to specify the item type, as I'm only looking for articles. I don't want books, because I'm guessing you don't have time to read books. And that just stay away from books. And generally, books for some reason are considered like not good scholarly sources, which I always found really weird. But you don't want those book reviews. Then there's like research reports, pamphlets, and miscellaneous. I don't know what those are, but because I've only ever searched for articles because that's the only thing I use it for. Now that they've added books to it, I'll sometimes use it to search for books because they'll sometimes have ebooks where available when I can't get them other places. But there's no reason for you to do that. You just want to use articles. So that's JSTOR, and then you can. The hard part about research is getting your keywords correct. So, right, you want like, maybe you can see some of my previous, I do teach comic books and literature, but you want, to keep your search terms a little bit short. If you have like one of those terms like and or but or so, anything like that, usually it's an and. Like if I wanted like Batman and gender, right, I would use 2 search boxes. So you can play around with it, but it's really getting the keywords right can be a difficult process, and you want to start out broader, and then depending on how many results you get, then you go more and more narrow. Because what you want to avoid is getting super, super specific and then getting like 0 results. And if you have that, then you're going to have to get a little broader and broader and broader. So just depending on, so it's a trial and error process. Okay, so that's everything I have. I think I said that earlier and then I went on, but I did want to show you the Hunt library, even though I know you've looked at it multiple times already this term. So good luck with everything, and don't hesitate to reach out should you have any questions. And that's all I got for you today, and I will be talking to you guys soon. Okay, bye.